and I admire their work. I quote a lot of his book because they abhor this issue for reasons that should catch everyone's attention. They see what's coming, and they don't appreciate the infantilization of the masses, treating everyone like infants and trying to scare them into accepting a fairly totalitarian lifestyle. And that's what remember, George Orwell was a left-winger who went to Spain to fight on behalf of the Russians, essentially, though he thought it was on behalf of Spain. And he came back and wrote 1984 on the basis of what he had encountered as a left-winger with communism. Mm-hmm. These folks have the same mentality. They don't trust the state. They're not what we view as classic left-wingers. And they gave the book high praise, call it a must-read. We both see what's coming, and they've had I've had firsthand experience, but they have in-country experience of what we are importing here. Let me give you some examples. You mentioned terrorism. Margaret Beckett is the United Kingdom's foreign secretary. They just call her the Secretary of State. She publicly demanded last year that the media stop speaking to people like me or giving us airtime because we are just like Islamic terrorists.
Wow.
What's our weapon? Speech. Okay. And so when Kevin Rudd was elected, the Labour Party Prime Minister of Australia last year, he like Barack Obama, he gathered their best and brightest, and he addressed a group of deep Australian thinkers. And one of the ideas thrown out was to strip Australians of their citizenship if they expressed dissent over catastrophic man-made global warming, but with the prospect of reclaiming their citizenship upon re-education. Now, these are civilized countries. California is importing the worst of these ideas, and you'll see California is a lot of what we've done domestically. It starts there, as you know, and it spreads, and they're doing it. So I show you what's going on in the UK and Europe and Australia, New Zealand, and show you how it's being replicated in the UK. And I appreciate, by the way, your comment about this being accessible, this book. I have a chapter it walks through what the media is doing with very specific examples. I have a chapter on what they're doing in the schools with very specific examples. It's not pointy-headed at all. It's terrifying. It's very saddening. I'm a father of two very small children. One radio host said, "You sound a little angrier than when I interviewed you about the politically incorrect guide." And I said, "You know what? I am. I now have two small sons. And this is no longer somebody else's problem or theoretical to me." And so, I brought it all together. It is heavily footnoted. Al Gore's book, as you know, he didn't source his claims. Mm-hmm. He just had a one-page in the back, here are things I've read. Now, I footnote heavily in case you want to go object at your kid's school, in case you want to object to your brother-in-law at Thanksgiving, in case you want to, you've got local governments trying to show how much they care through global warming initiatives. It's a reference volume as well, but it tells stories and has personal experiences. And again, I'm increasingly finding this necessary for a parent, for anybody who is confronted by. I have to tell you, at the most local level of government, individuals claiming that they need to do this, that, and the other, or take it away from you because they're going to control the climate. Right. Which is utterly, utterly absurd and not supported in the science.
Well, absolutely. And I think it's wonderful to have a book that is sourced because everyday folks in America that want to question or have a debate, and that's all it takes, folks, to really step into the lion's den to be attacked, is to say, let's just question the fact of whether or not we're destroying the planet single-handedly and we're on the verge of doomsday. And, I write on issues like abortion, border security, terrorism, all kinds of things, and I have never found a more caustic, a more contentious subject than the writing on global warming. You're liable to get less opposition from opening a Playboy in church than you will get by simply saying, let's just have a debate. You're immediately attacked. I was surprised myself how many credentialed, so-called credentialed people in the scientific world would just come out and just froth. The spittle would literally fly off the pages on the letters to the editor, and I'm sure that's only just a minuscule amount from what you've had to deal with. So my hats are off to you because you have to be bold. You're stepping into the lion's den. And folks, when you read in Red Hot Lies some of the initiatives that these global warming doomsayers want to enact, it's scary. It's just frightening. I think of page 212 where you look at the Carbon Sense Coalition in Australia and some of their proposals, taxing you for having babies and just insane things that it's just eye-opening. And so it's interesting. I wanted to touch on one little thing real quick.
Can I make a point about something that goes beyond the baby tax?
Yes.
It's related. I mean, even the Medical Journal of Australia came out and called for a baby tax. We have now before us a proposal from China to sell carbon offsets on the basis of their coercive family planning policy, that is, the number of abortions they've forced. China suggested at a Kyoto Protocol, the Global Warming Energy Rationing Treaty, in June, I think, of 2006, they suggested that their carbon footprint as a nation would be much bigger if they hadn't killed all the babies, and therefore they should be able to sell the difference between where it is and where it would be, which I hope your audience is not driving and is sitting down, because this is probably the most reprehensible thing I've heard yet. And guess what? Europe and the UN thought it was a swell idea because they need somewhere to get their carbon offsets, because despite the rhetoric, the lies, Europe's not reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. They're just buying indulgences from China, and this is to be their new source. So baby taxes are one thing. You actually may be confronted, if President Obama agrees to a new Kyoto Protocol, as they expect next year, with the prospect of buying carbon offsets from China. And while those are bogus accounting games anyway, imagine what they're claiming rhetorically lies behind them. So anyway, it goes beyond the offensive to the reprehensible, to the extent there's a distinction.
Absolutely, and I thought that in my same mind when I thought of taxing babies. I thought, well, we're not very far from then giving tax credits for abortions. We're not very far from a lot of other heinous things that you say no, but when you start at the ground level with things that are so fantastically crazy to start with, then the sky is the limit. And I look at President Obama, who doesn't want women punished with a baby anyway.
Right.
There you go.
Please, Paul, real quickly. This is always about population. This is the Sierra Club's director is the former political director of Zero Population Growth. People are pollution has long been the philosophy, and in fact, I view a soul, a heart, and a mind, a set of hands. They see a stomach.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and you touch on that, and I think it's very bold to say, look, a lot of these radical environmentalists that are pushing this thing, the enemy is not so much carbon emissions, the enemy is man. The enemy are humans. And you see that all the time, and you see documentaries, whether it's on the History Channel, and you see, what would the Earth be like without humans? I remember watching that very popular one, and the scientists just orgasmically talking about how wonderful things would be if man was no longer there. And included with that was the CO2 levels and so forth. And it scares me because I think, hey, you guys, we're all humans. You're kind of talking about you and me being a problem here and wanting to have us gone. But in your book, you talk about this keyword. We have so many buzzwords, and this buzzword of consensus is thrown around a lot. And I would say, other than it has only been surpassed maybe by the buzzwords of hope and change, so it might be number 3, but it is probably one of the heaviest buzzwords that comes out in global warming. You talk a little bit about just exactly what this word's about, why it's being used, and I thought that was very interesting. Could you talk just a little bit about this term consensus we hear all the time?
You can choose anything that has been the subject of scientific inquiry, or from the most simple to the most complex. The distance of the Earth to the sun, or that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. We don't say there's a consensus about those things. We say that that's the way things are, because we've established it. Consensus is new to science. It isn't science. It's a way to claim that we can't really. It's a way, without admitting it, to admit that they can't win a debate. They can't. Science has always been about here's my thesis, here's my hypothesis, make your best stab at it. And outside of, let's say, religion, bringing down an existing hypothesis has always been viewed in science, particularly, as progress. This, however, is religion to them. It is a faith. Everything proves it. Cooling proves warming. Wet and drought prove warming, and so on. And so it's being used to avoid debate, and they say the debate's over, yet they're using everything they can to redefine science in order to avoid it, and no one can remember when we had this debate. Now,